So let's dig into its history, design, mintage, and of course, its current value, especially if you have one in fine condition. The 1935 Lincoln wheat penny was minted during the Great Depression, a time when every cent counted. Designed by Victor David Brenner, this penny features the iconic portrait of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse. It's worth noting that Lincoln was the first actual person to be featured on a U.S. circulating coin, and his portrait on the penny debuted in 1909, the centennial of his birth. By 1935, the Lincoln design had already been circulating for over 25 years, but it remained, and still remains, a powerful symbol of American history and values. On the reverse of the coin, you'll find the words 1 cent and United States of America surrounded by 2 wheat stalks. This wheat ears design was used from 1909 to 1958, which is why these coins are commonly referred to as wheat pennies. Above the denomination is the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. This timeless design represents a simpler era in American coinage and continues to be loved by collectors around the world. In 1935, over 245 million Lincoln wheat pennies were minted at the Philadelphia Mint, which did not use a mint mark. This means that all 1935 pennies without a mint mark come from Philadelphia. Because of the high mintage, the coin is not considered rare, but its historical significance and age still make it desirable to collectors. Now let's talk about condition and value. In coin collecting, condition is everything. Coins are graded on a scale ranging from poor, P1, all the way to mint state, MS70. A coin in fine condition, which is abbreviated as F12, shows moderate wear. On a 1935 penny in fine condition, you'll still be able to clearly see Lincoln's profile and some of the details in his hair and beard. On the reverse, the wheat stalks will be worn but still visible. So, how much is a 1935 wheat penny in fine condition worth today? As of now, the value ranges from about 25 cents to 50 cents for most circulated examples in fine condition. That may not seem like a lot, but remember, that's 25 to 50 times its original face value. And for a coin that's almost 90 years old, it's a fun and affordable piece of history to add to your collection. If you're lucky enough to find a 1935 penny in extremely fine or uncirculated condition, the value goes up significantly. Uncirculated examples, especially those with red luster, can sell for $5 to $20 or more, depending on quality and eye appeal. While the 1935 penny doesn't have major varieties like doubled dies or missing mint marks, collectors still seek high-grade specimens and enjoy having a piece of Great Depression-era history in their albums. To sum it up, the 1935 Lincoln wheat penny may be common in terms of mintage, but it's far from ordinary. It tells the story of a struggling nation, a president who stood for unity, and a coin that survived nearly a century of use and handling. Whether it's worth a quarter or a few dollars, this coin carries a legacy that no modern cent can match. Next up, this small copper coin might look ordinary at first glance, but it's packed with history, and depending on its condition and mint mark, it could be worth more than just 1 cent. So if you found one of these in your change or inherited a collection, stick around, because this is everything you need to know about the 1930 wheat penny. Let's begin with the design. The obverse, or front side, of the coin features the familiar image of President Abraham Lincoln, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. This design was introduced back in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. It was a revolutionary moment in U.S. coinage, the first time an actual person appeared on circulating American money. Above Lincoln's head is the motto, "In God We Trust," while the word liberty appears to his left, and the date 1930 is on the right. On the reverse side, we see the classic wheat penny design. The words 1 cent and United States of America are boldly displayed in the center, framed on both sides by 2 stylized wheat stalks. This agricultural imagery gave the coin its nickname, the wheat penny. The Latin phrase, a pluribus unum, meaning out of many one, is inscribed at the top. This reverse design was in use from 1909 until 1958, after which it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial. Now let's talk about mintage. In 1930, there were 3 mints producing the Lincoln wheat penny: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 157 million coins which do not have a mint mark. The Denver Mint struck around 40 million, and you can identify these by the small D beneath the date. Meanwhile, the San Francisco Mint produced roughly 24 million, marked by an S under the date. While none of these mintages are particularly low, the San Francisco version is generally considered a bit more desirable among collectors due to its smaller number. As for metal content, like other wheat pennies of the era, the 1930 coin is made of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. Each coin weighs about 3.11 grams. Because of its high copper content, even damaged wheat pennies have some melt value. Though you should never melt collectible coins, they're often worth more intact. So, what about value? If you have a 1930 Lincoln wheat penny in fine or circulated condition, it's generally worth between 10 to 50 cents, depending on the mint mark and overall wear. Coins from Denver and San Francisco tend to fetch slightly higher prices. In very fine or extremely fine condition, values can rise to $1 or $2. And if you're lucky enough to own an uncirculated 1930 penny with a strong strike and original luster, it could be worth anywhere from $10 to over $50, especially if it's graded by a professional service like PCGS or NGC. And here's something to remember. Condition is everything in coin collecting. A 1930 penny pulled from circulation may not seem impressive at first, but even small scratches, dings, or discoloration can affect its grade and value. On the other hand, coins stored properly in albums or holders can preserve their appeal and increase in desirability over time. While the 1930 wheat penny isn't considered a rare coin, it remains a favorite among collectors for its historical context. Think about it. This penny was minted during the early years of the Great Depression. It was part of a struggling economy passed through the hands of Americans facing real hardship. Holding one today connects us to that chapter in history, a time when every cent was treasured. Next up, the 1944 D Lincoln wheat penny. Even if it's worn and has seen a lot of circulation, this little copper coin still tells an important story from American history, and depending on a few details, it may still be worth more than its face value. So let's break down the history, the design, and what a 1944 D wheat penny in well-worn condition is actually worth today. The 1944 D penny was minted in Denver, which is what the small D under the date stands for. This was during the final years of World War II, and like many things at the time, U.S. coinage was affected by the war effort. In fact, just 1 year earlier in 1943, pennies were made of steel coated in zinc instead of copper, because copper was being used for military supplies like shell casings and communications wire. But by 1944, copper was back, although the composition was slightly different. Most 1944 pennies, including those from Denver, were made using recycled shell casings, creating what collectors call shell case cents. The obverse of the I coin features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. This design was introduced in 1909 and quickly became a staple of American coinage. The reverse features 2 wheat stalks surrounding the words 1 cent and United States of America, with the Latin motto, a pluribus unum, at the top. It's a simple, powerful design that lasted until 1958. Now, let's talk about mintage. The Denver Mint produced over 430 million Lincoln wheat pennies in 1944, making it one of the most common issues in the entire wheat penny series. Because of that high mintage and the fact that these coins were used daily, many 1944 D pennies found today are heavily worn from years of circulation. So what's it worth? If your 1944D wheat penny is in worn or heavily circulated condition, meaning the fine details on Lincoln's face and the wheat stalks are faded or smoothed down, it's typically worth between 3 to 10 cents to collectors. That's not a huge amount, but it's still 3 to 10 times its face value, and that's pretty cool for a coin that's 80 years old. Now, if it were in better condition, say extra fine or uncirculated, the value could go up to a few dollars, or more. But in a well-worn state, it's a common but historical piece. Of course, always look closely. If your coin has a strange error, like a double die, off-center strike, or clipped planchet, those types of mistakes can make even a common 1944D penny far more valuable. Some error varieties can sell for $50 or even hundreds of dollars, depending on rarity and collector demand. So to wrap it all up, the 1944D wheat penny in worn condition is generally not rare, but it's still a fascinating reminder of wartime, America, and a great starter coin for new collectors. It may not buy you much today, but its real value is in the history it carries. If you have one, hold on to it. It's a small piece of a much bigger story. Next up, the 1946 Lincoln wheat penny was minted just after the end of World War II. America was transitioning from a wartime economy to a peacetime one, and millions of servicemen and women were returning home. The country was filled with both hope and uncertainty, and the coins of the time reflect that historical moment. In fact, the 1946 penny was the first full year back to normal copper coinage after the temporary use of steel in 1943 and shell casing cents in 1944 and 1945. The obverse of the 1946 penny features the same iconic portrait of President Abraham Lincoln that was introduced in 1909. Designed by Victor David Brenner, this image has remained on the penny ever since. Above Lincoln's head are the words, "In God We Trust." To the left, we see liberty, and to the right, the date, 1946. Some versions may have a small mint mark beneath the date, either a D for Denver or an S for San Francisco. But if there's no mint mark at all, that means it was minted in Philadelphia. On the reverse side is the classic wheat ears design, with two stylized stalks of wheat curving along the left and right edges of the coin. In the center are the bold words, 1 cent and United States of America, and just above them, the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, which means, out of many, one. This simple but powerful design represents the agricultural strength and unity of the nation. Now let's talk mintage. In 1946, the U.S. Mint produced an enormous number of these coins, over 1 billion across the 3 mint locations. That includes more than 991 million from Philadelphia, around 315 million from Denver, and nearly 199 million from San Francisco. Because so many were made, and because they weren't made of precious metal, the 1946 wheat penny is considered common, even after all these decades. But what about value? If you have a 1946 Lincoln wheat penny in fine condition, meaning it shows moderate wear but all major details are still visible, the value is modest, but it's still worth more than face value. In today's market, a 1946 wheat penny in fine condition usually sells for around 10 to 15 cents. If it has a D or S mint mark, that might nudge the value slightly higher, especially for collectors who are trying to complete a full set. In uncirculated mint state condition, prices can go up to several dollars, and even more if graded by a professional service. Still, even a worn or fine condition 1946 wheat penny has value beyond just money. It's a genuine piece of post-war American history. It represents a nation healing from global conflict, rebuilding its economy, and moving toward the modern age. Holding this coin is like holding a tiny time capsule. It passed through the hands of workers, veterans, families, and everyday Americans at a pivotal moment in the 20th century. So if you have a 1946 Lincoln wheat penny in fine condition, hang on to it. not just for its small collector's value, but for the story it tells. And who knows? It could be the missing piece in someone's collection, or the spark that launches your own interest in coin collecting. Next up, the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny, specifically one in full red uncirculated condition. While millions of these pennies were minted, not all of them have survived in pristine original red color. So what makes this coin special, and how much is it worth today? Let's take a closer look. The 1944 wheat penny was minted during a crucial moment in history, the final years of World War II. In 1943, just a year earlier, the U.S. Mint had switched to zinc-coated steel pennies to conserve copper for the war effort. Those 1943 steel cents are very recognizable and highly collectible in their own right. But in 1944, the Mint resumed using copper to strike cents, except they didn't use newly mined metal. Instead, they melted down leftover brass shell casings from the military to produce what collectors call shell case cents. These coins have a distinctive golden red tone when freshly struck, and that leads us to today's star, the full red 1944 penny. In terms of design, the coin features President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, or front side, a design created by Victor David Brenner in 1909 to mark Lincoln's 100th birthday. You'll see "In God We Trust" above Lincoln, liberty to his left, and the date 1944 to his right. On the reverse is the classic wheat ears design, with 1 cent and United States of America in the center, framed by 2 stylized wheat stalks. Above it all is the Latin motto, "E pluribus unum," which means "out of many, one." Now let's talk about value. The 1944 Lincoln cent was minted in huge quantities, over 1.4 billion coins across all 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. So, in average circulated condition, a 1944 penny is usually worth just a few cents to perhaps $1 or $2. But when a coin has been preserved in mint state condition with full red luster, that's when collectors get excited. In coin grading, full red means the coin still retains 95% or more of its original red copper color, that bright reddish tone you see when a penny is freshly minted. Most pennies darken over time to a brown or red-brown color due to oxidation. But if a 1944 wheat penny is uncirculated and graded MS-65 or higher by a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, and it still has that rich red hue, its value can jump significantly. A 1944 full red Lincoln wheat penny graded MS-65 can be worth between $20 and $50. In MS-66, values can go up to $100 or more, and Ultra Gem examples graded MS-67 with full red color have sold for $200 to $500 or more, especially if the coin has exceptional strike and eye appeal. One key thing to watch out for is that the coin must be certified as red, not red-brown or brown, and must be in a high uncirculated grade. Only a small percentage of 1944 cents have survived in that condition, which makes them more desirable to serious collectors who specialize in wheat pennies or mint state copper coins. So to sum it up, the 1944 Lincoln wheat penny is a coin that nearly every collector will come across, but finding one in full red mint state condition is a much rarer achievement. It connects us to a critical time in American history, when even small coins played a part in the nation's wartime and post-war recovery. And if you're lucky enough to own one of these brilliant red beauties in top condition, you might just be holding a small but valuable piece of American heritage. Next up, the 1949 Lincoln wheat penny. Whether you've just pulled one out of an old coin jar, inherited it in a collection, or found it in your pocket change, you might be wondering, is this little copper coin worth anything? And what's the story behind it? Well, stick around because in this video we'll explore the background, design, mintage details, and current value of the 1949 wheat penny, especially in fine circulated condition. Let's start with the historical context. The year 1949 was a time of post-war growth and rebuilding. World War II had ended just a few years earlier, and the United States was entering a new era of economic expansion and industrial development. People were buying cars, moving to the suburbs, and starting families. While it might have seemed like just a penny to most Americans at the time, coins like the 1949s tell us a lot about the era in which they were made. In those days, 1 cent had more purchasing power than today, enough to buy a stick of gum, a handful of candy, or even start a savings habit in a child's piggy bank. Now, the S mint mark on the 1949 S penny tells us it was struck at the San Francisco Mint. In that year, San Francisco produced about 64,290,000 wheat pennies, far fewer than the Philadelphia and Denver mints. That makes the 1949 S a little more desirable to collectors compared to its sister coins from other mints, especially when found in better condition. The coin features the same classic design introduced in 1909 by Victor David Brenner. On the obverse, or front, we have a right-facing portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, surrounded by the motto, "In God We Trust," above, the word liberty to the left, and the date 1949 to the right, followed by the small S mint mark just below the date. It's a clean, dignified design that has become one of the most familiar in American coinage. On the reverse, you'll see the bold words 1 cent and United States of America in the center, framed by 2 stalks of wheat, one on each side. This wheat ears design was used from 1909 until 1958 and gives the Lincoln cents from that era their popular nickname, wheat pennies. At the top of the reverse is the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. Now let's talk about the condition. A 1949 S penny in fine condition means it has some noticeable wear from circulation, but all the major details are still clearly visible. Lincoln's features are worn but recognizable, and the wheat stalks on the back still show most of their lines, even if they're a bit smoothed out. It's not uncirculated or mint state, but it's still a solid collectible for beginners and budget-conscious collectors. So what's it worth today? In fine condition, the 1949 S Lincoln wheat penny is generally worth around 10 to 20 cents. More than face value, but still relatively affordable. If it's in very fine or extremely fine condition, the value might rise slightly. Higher grade, examples such as uncirculated red specimens, can fetch several dollars or more from serious collectors. But even a worn coin has value, not just as a collectible, but as a small piece of American history. It's also worth checking for rare varieties or mint errors, which can happen with any coin. While the 1949 S isn't known for major errors, sometimes coins are struck off-center, double die, or feature-clipped planchets. These types of errors can significantly increase the value depending on their rarity and demand. So if you have a 1949 S wheat penny in fine condition, it may not make you rich, but it's a worthy addition to any wheat penny collection. And as time goes on and fewer of these coins remain in good condition, their value could slowly increase. More importantly, though, each coin like this is a miniature time capsule, linking us to a post-war America full of change, optimism, and growth. Next up, if you've got a 1954 penny in fine condition, you might be wondering how much it's worth and what story it tells. So let's dive into the history, design, and value of this classic American coin. The 1954 wheat penny was struck during the heart of the 1950s, a time when the U.S. was booming economically, suburban neighborhoods were growing, and coins like this one were a part of everyday life. People used wheat pennies constantly, for bus rides, candy, newspapers, and even payphones. It was a coin most Americans didn't think twice about, yet today it holds historic and collectible value. This penny features the iconic image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, or front of the coin, designed by Victor David Brenner. That design was first introduced in 1909 to mark Lincoln's 100th birthday and has remained in use ever since. On the front, you'll see "In God We Trust" along the top edge, the word "Liberty" to the left of Lincoln's portrait, and the year 1954 on the right side. The reverse side of the coin is just as recognizable, with two wheat stalks curving inward to frame the inscriptions "1 cent" and "United States of America." Above that is the Latin phrase "E pluribus unum," meaning "out of many, one." This reverse design gives the wheat penny its nickname and was in use from 1909 through 1958. Now, when it comes to minting, over 71 million Lincoln cents were struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1954. These coins do not carry a mint mark. There were also millions more produced in Denver and San Francisco that year, which do bear a D or S mint mark beneath the date. But today, we're focusing on the plain 1954 penny from Philadelphia in fine condition, meaning it has moderate wear but all the major details are still visible. As for value, a 1954 Lincoln wheat penny in fine condition isn't rare, but it's still worth more than face value to collectors who are building complete date and mint sets. On average, you can expect a 1954 penny in fine condition to be worth about 5 to 10 cents. That might not seem like a lot, but for those who enjoy collecting, especially young or beginner numismatists, it's a fun and affordable way to explore history. Now, if you happen to have a 1954 penny in uncirculated or mint state condition, especially one with its original red color and strong details, the value can go up significantly, often ranging from a few dollars to even $20 or more depending on the grade. But in circulated fine condition, it's mainly appreciated for its historical charm rather than its rarity. So there you have it, the 1954 Lincoln wheat penny. It's a coin that's easy to find, affordable to collect, and packed with history. From a unique time in American life. If you've got one in your collection, hold on to it as a piece of the past. And who knows, it might just inspire you to dig deeper into the world of coin collecting. Minted in 1909, the Lincoln Wheat Penny series was designed by Victor David Brenner to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. These coins feature his portrait on the obverse, making it the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. The reverse design, with two wheat stalks surrounding the words 1 cent, gave this coin its popular nickname, the wheat penny. Fast forward to 1952, a time when the United States was emerging from the Second World War and the economy was changing rapidly. In that year, the Denver Mint struck over 746 million Lincoln wheat pennies. That's a massive number, which means the 1952 D penny is not considered a rare coin overall. However, collectors still value them, especially coins in uncirculated or mint state condition. But what about a 1952 D wheat penny that's in bad condition? Maybe it's scratched, worn, down, discolored, or missing clear details. You might be surprised to learn that even coins like these can hold some value, though not much in terms of market price. Their value can be symbolic or sentimental, especially for beginner collectors or those building complete date sets. In general, a 1952 D wheat penny in poor condition, what collectors call good or about good condition, might only be worth around 3 to 5 cents. That's just slightly above face value. However, if you have a bunch of wheat pennies, even worn ones, their value can add up over time. Collectors sometimes buy bulk wheat pennies by the pound, and that's where heavily circulated coins like these often end up. It's also worth noting that the 1952 D penny was made of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, which gives it a rich, dark tone as it ages. Even in poor condition, that copper content alone gives it a bit of intrinsic value, especially when copper prices go up. Now, let's talk about errors or variations. While rare, if your 1952 D penny has a noticeable minting error, such as a doubled die, off-center strike, or repunched mint mark, it could still be worth much more, even in worn condition. Some, of these error coins have sold for several dollars or more, depending on the type and severity of the error. But finding one like that is rare, and most bad-condition 1952 D pennies are just regular coins that have seen decades of use. So how do you tell if your coin is just worn out or something special? First, check for any signs of doubling, especially around the date or lettering. Then examine the mint mark, the D just below the date, to see if it looks like it was stamped more than once. Use a magnifying glass or coin loop to get a good look. If you're still unsure, you can always consult a professional coin dealer or send your coin to a grading service like PCGS or NGC for evaluation. But keep in mind, professional grading isn't usually worth it for low-value coins in poor condition. Next up, the 1917 Lincoln Wheat Penny. Specifically, we'll focus on the version that's in faded or heavily circulated condition. While it might not look like much at first glance, this coin has an incredible backstory and still holds value in the world of numismatics. So let's talk about what makes the 1917 Wheat Penny special, how it fits into American history, and what it might be worth today, even when it's far from mint condition. The Lincoln Wheat Penny was first introduced in 1909, created to celebrate the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, it became the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. With Lincoln's portrait on the front and two stylized wheat ears on the back, the coin quickly became a favorite among the American public. Fast forward to 1917. This was a time when the United States had just entered World War I. The economy was changing, the country was mobilizing for war, and coins like the Lincoln Wheat Penny were a small but constant part of everyday life. In that year alone, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 196 million Lincoln cents, making the 1917 penny fairly common in terms of original mintage. There were also smaller mintages from the Denver and San Francisco mints, marked by the D and S mint marks under the date. If you're holding a 1917 penny that's faded, scratched, or extremely worn, chances are it came from the Philadelphia Mint, as most of those coins didn't carry a mint mark. Over time, circulation and heavy use can cause the fine details, like Lincoln's hair, the Liberty inscription, and even the date, to become faint or hard to read. That kind of wear is common for a coin that's over 100 years old, and it's what collectors call good or about good condition. Now, in terms of value, a heavily worn 1917 wheat penny with no mint mark is generally worth between 20 cents and 50 cents. That might not sound like much, but it's still significantly above its original face value. And if you have the 1917D or 1917S varieties in the same poor condition, those can be worth slightly more, usually between 50 cents and $1.50, depending on the exact level of wear and current market demand. Remember, these values apply to coins that are heavily circulated. If you had a higher grade example with sharper details, the value could jump significantly. One thing to keep an eye out for, even on faded coins, is the possibility of minting errors. Some 1917 wheat pennies are known for having doubled die obverses, which means the image and text on the front of the coin appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. This type of error can dramatically increase the value of a coin, even if it's in worn condition. A 1917 doubled die penny, even with wear, could be worth $100 or more, depending on how visible the doubling is. That's why it's always worth examining your coin carefully under good lighting or with a magnifying glass. Beyond value, what makes the 1917 wheat penny fascinating is the history it represents. Think about it. This coin was in people's pockets during a world war, during the presidency of Woodrow Wilson, and during a time of major societal change in the United States. It has likely passed through countless hands, survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and decades of use before finally ending up in your collection, your change jar, or your drawer. Even in poor condition, a 1917 wheat penny is a piece of living history. It reminds us of a time when 1 cent could buy you a handful of candy or a ride on a streetcar. While its monetary value may not be high, the historical and sentimental value is something collectors truly appreciate. Next up, let's begin with some historical context. The year was 1944. World War II was raging on, and nearly every industry in the United States was focused on supporting the war effort. The country had already made one major change to coinage. Just a year earlier in 1943, when pennies were made of steel coated with zinc instead of the usual copper. This was done to save copper for ammunition and military equipment. Those 1943 steel cents are now famous in the world of coin collecting. But in 1944, the U.S. Mint returned to using copper to make pennies. However, due to the ongoing war, they didn't use freshly mined copper. Instead, many of the 1944 pennies were made from recycled shell casings collected from the battlefield. These casings were melted down and turned into coin blanks, then struck into pennies. That makes the 1944 penny not just a coin, it's a piece of wartime history. In total, the U.S. Mint produced more than 1.4 billion 1944 Lincoln wheat pennies across its 3 mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. That means 1944 is one of the highest mintage years for wheat pennies. As a result, most 1944 pennies are quite common, even today. You'll often find them in circulated condition, including those that are dirty, scratched, or worn down from decades of use. Now let's talk about value. If you have a 1944 wheat penny that's in dirty and damaged condition, maybe it's discolored, covered in grime, or has heavy wear, it's likely to be valued at just a few cents. On average, a coin like this might be worth around 3 to 5 cents, depending on how bad the damage is. If it's really rough, its value may stay close to face value, especially if there's no visible date or the coin is corroded. If the coin was minted in Philadelphia, it won't have a mint mark. Those are the most common 1944 pennies. If there's a small D under the date, that means it came from the Denver Mint. A small S means it was made in San Francisco. Even in dirty or damaged condition, the Denver and San Francisco mint marks might give the coin a slightly higher value, but generally only a few cents more, unless the coin is in very high grade, which in this case it isn't. However, there is one rare error coin from 1944 that's worth a lot of money. It's called the 1944 steel penny. That's right. Some leftover steel planchets from 1943 accidentally got mixed into the 1944 production and were struck as 1944 steel cents. These coins are extremely rare and valuable, even in worn condition. If your 1944 penny is gray or magnetic, there's a chance it might be one of these rare errors. But keep in mind, these are very rare, and most 1944 pennies are made of copper. Also, some people try to clean old or dirty coins, but it's important to know that cleaning a coin can actually lower its value. Collectors prefer coins in their original state, even if they're dirty or discolored. Cleaning can scratch the surface or strip away the coin's natural patina, and that reduces both historical and collectible value. So, if you have a 1944 penny that's seen better days, it's usually best to leave it the way it is. Even in bad condition, the 1944 wheat penny is still a wonderful find. It's over 75 years old, and it holds a small piece of American history. It reminds us of a time when the nation was united during war, when resources were scarce, and when coins like these were part of daily life for people working hard to support the country. For collectors, even the most worn coins help complete a date and mint mark set. And for anyone interested in history, it's amazing to hold something that's passed through so many hands over such a long period. Next up, the Lincoln wheat penny was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. Designed by Victor David Brenner, it featured Lincoln's profile on the obverse and 2 wheat stalks on the reverse. It quickly became one of the most iconic coins in American history. In 1955, the Denver Mint produced over 563 million wheat pennies. That's right, 563 million. These coins were struck in large numbers to keep up with the growing economy in the post-World War II era. With such a high mintage, the 1955 D penny is not rare in itself. You can find them quite easily, especially in circulated condition. The D under the date indicates it was minted in Denver. But what makes your coin different is the black shade or dark discoloration. This is not a rare mint error. It's actually the result of environmental damage or chemical reactions over time. A coin can turn black due to exposure to moisture, dirt, air pollution, high humidity, or even being buried underground or stored in poor conditions. The copper surface reacts with oxygen and other elements, forming a dark or black patina. This kind of toning is common on older coins, especially those that weren't stored properly. Now, it's important to understand that a black or dark-toned wheat penny is usually not more valuable than a normal one. In fact, the black color often means the coin is graded as damaged or environmentally altered, which typically lowers its collector value. Even though it looks unique, most collectors prefer coins with original natural luster or even wear over those with discoloration caused by damage. In circulated condition, especially if the coin is dark, scratched, or worn, a 1955 D penny is usually worth around 3 to 5 cents. It's a small increase over face value, mostly because it's an older wheat penny made of 95% copper. Copper itself has intrinsic value, so these coins are often saved for their metal content, especially when copper prices rise. However, that doesn't mean the 1955 D penny has no value at all. It still has a place in collections, especially for those completing a full date and mint mark set of Lincoln wheat pennies, and it holds historical value too. It was minted during the Eisenhower administration, a time when America was in the middle of the Cold War and new technologies, industries, and suburban life were booming across the country. It's also worth noting that 1955 is a famous year in the Lincoln cent series because of the well-known 1955 double die error, though that only occurred at the Philadelphia Mint, not in Denver. That error features a dramatic doubling of the date and lettering and is highly sought after by collectors. Unfortunately, the 1955 D penny was not part of that error batch, so if your coin has a D mint mark, it's not one of those rare double dies. Next up, is this coin rare? Does the black color make it special? What is its true value today? Let's explore all of this in detail as we look into the history and value of the 1956 D black-shaded wheat penny. Let's begin with some background. The Lincoln wheat penny was first minted in 1909 and ran until 1958. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the coin features President Abraham Lincoln on the front and 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent on the back. It was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person's image and quickly became a piece of American numismatic history. Now let's talk about 1956, the second to last year of the wheat penny's production. In 1956, the Denver Mint produced an enormous number of these coins, over 1.098 billion wheat pennies with the D mint mark. That means this coin is quite common in circulated condition. So, what about your 1956 D penny that appears black or dark in color? That black shade is usually the result of toning or environmental damage. Over time, copper coins like the Lincoln wheat penny can change color due to exposure to moisture, air pollutants, chemicals, or simply being buried or stored improperly. Instead of the typical reddish or brown tone, these coins can turn black, dark gray, or even green depending on the conditions they were exposed to. Let's be clear. This black color is not a mint error. It's not something that happened during production. It's a post-mint condition issue that collectors call environmental damage. While it might look interesting or antique to the untrained eye, this discoloration actually reduces the value of the coin in most cases. So, what's the value of a 1956 D wheat penny in black or damaged condition? In this dark-toned or blackened state, especially if it has scratches, corrosion, or heavy wear, the coin is typically worth between 2 to 5 cents. That's just slightly above its face value, mostly because of its copper content. But if the coin is only darkly toned, without deep corrosion or heavy damage, and it still has visible details, it might sell for around 10 to 15 cents to someone looking for a filler coin for their wheat penny set. On the other hand, if your 1956D penny is in uncirculated or brilliant condition, its value can jump up. Mint state examples, MS-60 to MS-65, can be worth $1 to $5 or more, especially if the coin shows a clean strike, strong luster, and no spots or discoloration. But again, a black shade usually means the coin has been compromised by age and the elements. That puts it on the lower end of the value spectrum. Now, what about errors? While 1956D pennies don't have any major well-known mint errors like the famous 1955 doubled die from Philadelphia, there are a few minor varieties and minting issues that collectors look out for, such as repunched mint marks, RPMs, or die cracks. If your dark 1956D penny happens to have one of these errors, it could still be worth more, even in worn or toned condition. Next up, the 1944D wheat penny was struck at the Denver Mint and features the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner. This design first appeared in 1909 and ran through 1958 with the wheat ears on the reverse. The 1944 penny is particularly interesting because of its historical context. Just 1 year earlier, in 1943, the U.S. Mint produced pennies from zinc-coated steel instead of the usual copper. This was done to save copper for ammunition and other military needs during World War II. But the steel cents had issues. They rusted quickly and were often mistaken for dimes. So in 1944, the Mint switched back to using copper, specifically repurposed shell casings from the war. This alloy was called shell case bronze, and it gave the 1944 pennies a distinctive appearance. The Denver Mint alone struck over 430 million of these pennies, making them one of the most commonly produced coins of that year. If you have a 1944D penny that's damaged, corroded, worn down, or heavily discolored, you might be wondering if it's still worth anything. The truth is, in most cases, coins in bad condition carry very little numismatic value. A heavily damaged coin may be missing details, such as parts of the date, Lincoln's hair, or the wheat stalks on the reverse. It might also show signs of corrosion, be bent or scratched, or have environmental damage from being underground or exposed to moisture. These flaws significantly reduce the coin's appeal to collectors. Most collectors seek well-preserved examples with sharp details, clean surfaces, and original color. When a coin is too damaged, it's considered a filler, just something to hold the place in a collection until a better example is found. In the case of a 1944D penny in poor condition, its value usually stays around 1 to 3 cents. Sometimes, it might bring 5 cents if it's in slightly better shape. Coins that have a lot of surface damage or are badly worn don't typically exceed that price range. The only time a damaged coin might still be valuable is if it has a known mint error, such as a double die, off-center strike, or a planchet error. However, such errors on 1944D pennies are quite rare, and they are even more difficult to verify on a coin that is already in bad shape. In most cases, a damaged 1944D penny doesn't show any of these rare features and is instead valued only for its metal content and historical interest. Now, many people wonder whether cleaning the coin will make it more attractive or more valuable. The answer is no. Cleaning a coin, especially with chemicals or abrasives, almost always lowers its value. Collectors can easily tell when a coin has been cleaned, and it often removes the natural patina that can protect the coin and even add to its appeal. Even in bad condition, it's better to leave a coin as is than to attempt cleaning it. The damage is already there, and cleaning won't reverse it. It usually just makes it worse. Despite its low value, the 1944D penny is a fascinating piece of history. Think about where it's been. Minted in the heart of World War II, possibly. from the shell casings of real bullets used in battle and passed through the hands of Americans during a time of global upheaval and national unity. This penny might have helped buy a soda at a corner shop in 1945, been dropped in a church offering plate, or given as a tip in a diner filled with jazz music and optimism. Even when worn or damaged, this coin has character and tells a story of American resilience. Next up, the 1946 wheat penny was struck just after World War II had ended. It was a time of rebuilding and optimism in the United States. Families were reuniting, soldiers were coming home, and industry was shifting from war production to peacetime. The U.S. Mint, which had played a key role during the war by producing wartime coinage such as steel cents in 1943, returned to producing coins using more traditional metals. In 1946, the penny was once again made of a copper alloy known as bronze, which consisted of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This return to normalcy in coin production reflected the broader return to normal life across the country. The Lincoln wheat penny design, created by Victor David Brenner, remained unchanged in 1946. It featured the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln on the front and two wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America on the reverse. The year 1946 saw over 1 billion wheat pennies produced across all three mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint alone produced over 991 million, which means the 1946 wheat penny is extremely common today, especially in circulated or worn condition. When it comes to the value of a 1946 wheat penny in worn condition, it's important to understand what worn means. Worn coins are those that have been used in everyday transactions for many years. The high points of the design are typically smoothed out. Lincoln's hair and jawline may be faint, the details of his coat may be nearly gone, and the wheat ears on the back might be flat or barely visible. There may also be discoloration, scratches, or signs of corrosion if the coin was stored in poor conditions or exposed to moisture. Because of the high mintage and the large number of surviving examples, 1946 wheat pennies in worn condition generally have very little collector value. Most dealers would value them at around 1 to 3 cents, maybe 5 cents, if the coin has a little more detail or better color. These coins are often considered fillers, meaning they are used by collectors who want to complete a set but don't yet have a higher grade version of that year. They're common and affordable, which makes them great for beginners, but they rarely attract interest from advanced collectors unless they are in uncirculated or mint state condition. It's natural to wonder whether an old coin like this can become more valuable over time. Unfortunately, the answer is usually no, at least not for coins in poor or worn condition. Because so many 1946 pennies were made and because so many still exist, there isn't much scarcity to drive up the price. However, if the coin has an error, like a double die,